Hello and welcome to The Howl. In today's podcast, we had two local veterans talk about how their childhood had an impact on their military journey, personal passions for helping veterans, and our community's patriotic spirit. We hope you enjoy. Welcome to The Howl. We are your hosts, Karis and Kelsey, here on Veterans Day with two veterans, Mr. Eric Peterson, who served 6 active tours in Afghanistan, and General Jim Mukoyama. We will discuss how patriotism is seen in their eyes and how it's had an impact on their lives. Thank you, two, for joining us, and thank you for everyone who's tuning in.
So we know that both of you guys have a different story, but could each of you take us back to when you were children and how your childhood shaped you?
Well, I grew up in the inner city of Chicago in the Logan Square neighborhood. My father immigrated from Japan. We were probably lower middle class, social economic. We didn't own a home. We always lived in a tenant apartment building, but I never felt poor because we had an intact nuclear family. My grandparents lived with us, so we had 3 generations. Our church was only 2 blocks away from our house, and I went to public schools. We were the only minority family in the entire neighborhood. It was mostly Polish, Italian, German, some Jewish, and us, and that was it. But I never felt any prejudice. A couple times, some things happened, but it was never anything that was always at the uppermost of my mind. I was just a kid. I was just an American kid like everybody else. We were members of the church. My dad had a small business, retail business, and everybody knew us, basically. See, in those days, the neighborhoods in the city, I know it's going to be hard for you to believe this, but we didn't lock our doors. Everybody knew everybody. Many of the mothers did not work. They stayed home. In fact, they were the neighborhood police. If anybody came into the neighborhood who was, kind of a stranger, they kind of checked out that person. And it was a wonderful place to live. Everybody helped each other out. We played in the street. We didn't have, we had no lawns. I mean, everything was all concrete. But it was a great time to grow up. We really had a community. That was the big thing, was community.
So I grew up in Kankakee, Illinois, which David Letterman famously gave us 2 gazebos for years ago for being the worst city in America, which I don't agree with, but, that's what he thought. I grew up, my mom came here from the Philippines when she was 30, and after she had met my father through as a pen pal. And I grew up being also the only Asian kid in my entire school, in my neighborhood, anywhere. And I was bullied a little bit. It wasn't, terrible. I'm sure, everybody gets bullied, right, for something. But I was bullied quite a bit in elementary school. And my parents, I had very much a working-class family. My dad worked at a post office. My mom was always working in either, a warehouse or an office job. So, like the general said, I never felt poor because I always had a roof over my head. I always had 3 square meals. I had that nuclear family, which I definitely appreciated very much. But some of the bullying got to the point where my parents were like, okay, we're going to move. And so I moved, and I went to another school where there were 3 Asian kids in the entire school, me being one of them. And the other 2 Asian kids were brothers. So everybody assumed that I was their other brother. So I went through that my entire high school, but I still had enough friends, and I felt like I was welcomed enough where I really appreciated my time in high school. I still maintain a lot of those relationships. And then my mom, I remember her citizenship ceremony when she became an American citizen because of the process that it took for her to come here to this country. And so I have all those pictures. And I actually went through them recently because, unfortunately, my mother passed away due to some complications of cancer 3 weeks ago. And so I'd gone through these pictures recently, and it just kind of renewed again my love for this country because of what it gave my mother, the opportunities that it gave my mother. Because before she passed away, one of the things that I asked her was if she had any regrets. And she told me, without wasting any time, she said no. Because if she would have had this life in the Philippines, she probably would have died a long time ago. And so she was so thankful for what this country gave her. And that patriotism is something that obviously was instilled in me pretty deep.
So you just kind of talked about the role your family played. General, what role did your family play at the time when you were so young?
Well, they inculcated in me the cultural values of the Japanese culture, which are basically perseverance, hard work, loyalty, respect for elders. That was huge. Respect for elders, respecting our teachers. The worst thing I could do is if I came home with a note from the teacher, or to go see the principal, which I never did, by the way. But that, and it wouldn't have been because of the principal or the teacher. It would have been because my parents, when I got home, would not have really been real happy about that. So I understood that. Church was a big deal in our house. Every Sunday we put on our, it used to be called Sunday best clothes. You'd actually dress up, and we walked as a family to church. So I was active in choir. I was active in Boy Scouts. Scouting was huge in terms of the motto of Scouting is forgotten country, and everything else flows from that. And you learn teamwork, you learn dedication, you learn patriotism. And so those things were taught by my parents and my grandparents, as well as scouting in our church.
I'm sure that Eric, you'll say the same, but like, what role would you say that your country played when you were so young?
So the best way to answer that question for me would be to describe where I was on September 11, 2001, because I was in my English teacher's homeroom class, and for that to happen, and I was, I think I was in like 7th grade or something like that, but that was the day that kind of the ability to be naive was kind of stripped, right? Because you're watching this happen, and as a child, you're seeing all these adults terrified around you. Your teachers are afraid, your parents are afraid, and that's not something that you were ever used to seeing. And when that happened, it kind of turned everything on its axis for me, where I was so afraid for like the first time. I didn't know what was going on. And then on September 12th, I saw an entire country of people picking themselves up, dusting each other off. And for the first time in forever for me, I understood what that community really meant. Like, I saw everybody looking at each other like, hey, it's not you live in this house, I live in this house, we see each other once in a while and make some disingenuous conversation. It was, no, we're all in this together. You get that, right? Like, do you need something? Are you okay? And the feelings that I saw happen there really stuck with me for so long, and that was a big part of why I joined the military. And anytime you see a hurricane, anytime you see anything like that happen, we're in Illinois. When Hurricane Harvey hit in Texas, we were sending bass boats packed full of relief and Connexes from over 1,000 miles away. Those are the type of things that really instill patriotism in me, because that's where I'm like, that's who we are. That's what we do. We take care of each other in those moments.
So when you enlisted, what were you like trying to get out of that?
At the time I enlisted, I wasn't sure, because I joined between my junior and senior year. So I went to boot camp at Fort Benning, Georgia, for junior and senior year. And then after my senior year, when everybody was celebrating, I was going back to Fort Benning to be in the infantry. And so other than the patriotism that was instilled then, I grew up with an uncle that was a Vietnam veteran, and I respected him very much. He never shared his stories that much with me, but he was always incredibly patriotic. And then my grandfather was a World War II veteran. And so those were the other things that played a part in my role, because at that point, I wasn't sure where I fit in, and I wanted to be a part of something bigger than me, and joining the military gave me that opportunity.
In general, same for you. What was the reason you chose to enlist?
Well, I volunteered, but I went to University of Illinois, and I was in, let me backtrack. When I was in high school, Chicago has the nation's largest high school ROTC program. It's called Junior ROTC, okay? It's misunderstood by a lot of people. They think it's a filler for the military. It's not. It is really an experience, an opportunity for high school students, especially in the inner city, to have an experience with serving, with being with a team. It's an alternate option from gangs, and they learn discipline. They learn to be dependable, to work hard, and I'd say, a majority don't necessarily join the military, but it's an experience that they really enjoy. So I was in high school ROTC, really loved it. I went to the University of Illinois. I was in the senior ROTC and got my commission as an infantry officer. Eric and I share Fort Benning, which is the home of the United States Army Infantry. In the military, you have what are called MOSs, which are military occupational specialties. And for the enlisted people, it's 2 numbers and a letter. And there might be some other numbers later, but it's really 2 numbers and a letter. For infantry, which is the best branch,
That's right.
is 11 Bravo or 11B, okay? And so I went to Fort Benning just like he did, went through training there, but what was particular for me was that being of Japanese descent, the samurai warrior and the samurai tradition in the Japanese culture is huge. The social strata in Japan society, the highest is the warrior. Okay, unlike China, where in China the highest is the scholar, but in Japan it was the warrior. So I was always raised with, and it was like the knights in England. You have the chivalric code for the knights. Well, in Japan you had what was called Bushido, and Bushi was the warrior, and Do is the path or the way. So Bushido is the way of the warrior. And they had extremely high standards of honesty, of loyalty. And when I became a lieutenant in the Army, my dad was so proud of me because I was an officer, which means that's kind of like the samurai level, And so when I became a general, it just blew his mind. I mean, that was huge.
And going back to the beginning of your military journey, what is something that, like a goal you had, or what were you looking to put into your whole military experiences? Would you say you achieved this goal looking back on all the years?
Well, I did have a goal secretly, kind of, to become a general. But frankly, when I joined the military, there had never been an Asian American general or admiral. So the odds were kind of not high that I could get there. But, being an American guy, you have opportunity. And as long as you work hard, it's not going to guarantee that you're going to be a huge success. But you will do well in life. And so I wanted to be as best I could be, shall we say. And being an officer, being a general officer would be that. But I had great non-commissioned officers who made me look good. They're the sergeants. They're where the rubber meets the road. In fact, as a very young lieutenant, I had some great seasoned NCOs who had fought in Korea, and they were they just led me and helped me. But I was always considered the officer, the guy in charge. Make no mistake about that. But they knew that they needed to pass on their experience to me. And I had great senior officers who mentored me, and I was very blessed. So I was the youngest general in the Army in 1986. I was 42 years old as a one-star general. That is very young, believe me. And then 3 years later, I was the youngest two-star general. So I realize how lucky I am, how blessed I am. There were many more officers who were more qualified than I to become a general, and they never made it. And I had no political connections. I was just one of the guys trying to do the best I could. But the good Lord blessed me, and I was very fortunate.
Well, congratulations, because you're definitely very deserving of that.
Oh, thank you.
So for Eric,
Yes.
like growing up, like with having him as an example, like did that really like help you have someone to look up to?
So I was unfamiliar with General Mukoyama until he went on Jocko Willink's podcast. And it meant so much to me to understand that somebody has done it before, because he paved the way for someone like me to be able to know that there is an opportunity for me. There is a way that if I work hard enough, there's no excuses. Like you just said, if you work hard enough, you could get it. Because the one thing that I learned when I first joined the military, and I don't mean for this to sound bleak, but in my opinion, everybody is equally worthless until you prove what that worth is. And you prove it through your work ethic. And it didn't matter what color you were. It just mattered how hard you worked. And so while there were times where I doubted myself as far as like what I could do, because when you start doubting yourself, you start making excuses for yourself, right? I can't do it because of this, that, or the other. But then General Mukoyama, he does it. So you can't make an excuse that, it's because I'm Asian. It's because of this. Like, no, I can't say that because I have somebody like him to look up to, which is why I told him how much I appreciated just being able to be here and shake his hand. So, yeah, it's for sure helped me later in life with something that I think is extremely important for everybody, which is making sure that you don't live behind excuses,
So you talk about working so hard, and can you explain to us how dedication and persistence is so important when going through this journey?
Well, it's incredibly important for me now because now I work with veterans a lot that are dealing with significant mental health and substance abuse issues. Before I walked in here, I was on the phone with a veteran that's in the mental health floor of my local hospital because he tried to kill himself on Tuesday. And my local police department keyed me into it based on a program I have with my organization. And I got to him Wednesday morning, and I was able to kind of calm him down. And now the nurses, they have my phone number, and so when he starts getting a little riled up and they need somebody to de-escalate him, they'll give me a call. And so they reached out to me earlier, about an hour ago, and so as soon as I got out of that ceremony, I reached out to him and I talked him down, and that's a majority of what I do. And so perseverance is so important because when you deal with other people, especially veterans that are dealing with mental health, in my opinion, it can be extremely draining on you too. And if you're not careful and if you don't set proper boundaries, it can wreck you. I'd worked with a lot of veterans. I dealt with a lot of veterans that were addicted to methamphetamines and trying to get them to make the decision that they needed to get help. And sometimes, at some points, it only took a few days or a week. And at one point, it took me 3 years with this Marine. And it took me 3 years of working with him because the thing I learned early on was I can't make anybody do anything. I need to make sure that they know that they're loved unconditionally and that I'm here to support them. And when they make the decision to get help, they know I'm right there and I can help them. Because when I brought veterans to get help before and they weren't doing it for the right reasons, they would go through rehab and then they would be right back to square one. But the veterans that realized, no, I'm ready to go get help right now, and I kind of assisted them getting to whatever facility they needed to go to, those ones always did so much better afterwards. And so it's a lot of perseverance. It's exhausting, but you know you're doing it for the right reasons. And you're doing it because at the base of everything. You just want to let these veterans know that they're not alone. And sometimes, depending on what you're going through, letting somebody know that they're not alone is enough. So perseverance is everything, I think, with what I do now.
So there's people like you that do like amazing stuff, like your work, but how can someone like the viewers watching or us like show our patriotism and help people?
I would love to hear the general's opinion on this. I'll give you mine quickly. In my opinion, if you want to show your patriotism, you make this country the country that veterans were proud to serve, to deploy for, to live for, to die for. That's what you do. You just make this, you do whatever it is in your community to make this country that. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and I would definitely confirm that in spades. Eric's been really very eloquent in his discussion of dealing with veterans that are dealing with what we call the invisible wounds of war. Their post-traumatic stress, their traumatic brain injury, and moral injury. The last one, moral injury, is not very well known among the public, but it is one of the most, it's a significant contributor to the suicide rate among our veterans. Now, what is moral injury? 30 seconds, here it is. From the time you're born until you're 18 years old, you develop a personal moral code. That could come from your family, your faith, your community, whatever. Then you join the military and you learn a warrior code. That warrior code is superimposed on your personal moral code and in fact transforms it somewhat. Then you may have to participate in activities that violate your personal moral code, such as killing. You don't have to be the person that pulls the trigger. This is very important. You could be a witness, or you could feel you should have prevented it, or you survive it. And so, but in military operations, we're constantly moving. You don't have time to stop and think about this stuff. So what do? You bury it, and it becomes unresolved guilt and shame. Then you come back to the States, and let's say you get out of the military, or you're a National Guardsman or a reservist. You come back to Arlington Heights or Chicago, to a community that doesn't understand what you've been through. And then it bubbles up to the surface. And unless you have a strong coping mechanism for that, or strong support community, bad stuff happens. Anger, guilt, depression, suicide. It is the position of Military Outreach USA, our organization, which is very in sync with Eric's, is that the main approach to moral injury is not a medical doctor with drugs. It's the counseling of sensitive therapists, clergy. It's to understand and have hope and help. And so we also have what we call foxhole soul counselors. These are not registered social workers, psychologists. They're just guys like Eric and I that have kind of walked in those boots, and we walk alongside veterans who are dealing with these issues. The first thing you do is listen, and be there physically. Those are the two things that are absolutely critical. Non-judgmental, just be with them and listen. And you develop a relationship. It's called a peer-to-peer type thing. And once that relationship is developed, you can then, introduce or offer ways that they could get help. But they first have to recognize what they have. If they don't realize what they have, then it's just like any addiction. If you don't admit or understand what you have, you can't fix it. So that's what we do, trying to help vets. And, Eric and I are like twins, doing what we're doing.
I'll take that compliment all day. Thank you.
And today, through our service and our assembly, listening to all the speakers and listening to the band, walk us through like some of the emotions going through your guys' heads and just what today meant to you.
So, to be able to see things like this, to be able to see what your school does, because I've come to this ceremony, I don't know, every year for like the past few years. And in addition to that, I saw you in Kentucky doing the home build for the veteran down there. So to see schools like this do these types of things, that means a lot on the surface. But when I walk in here and I bring another veteran with our organization to show them, no, you need to understand your home. You need to understand this is what a community is and that you need to feel okay here. And to have students come up to us genuinely thanking you, genuinely wanting to sit down and talk to you about your service, about your experience, like those things mean so much because you can't put a value on that. You can't put a value on someone actually caring and taking a little bit of time just to really want to know like about your service. What did you do? I want to thank you for your service, but in thanking you, I want to learn more about you because that opens it up for a conversation, which I think is what a lot of veterans need. They just need to have a conversation. They need to feel like they're home, and they need to feel like they can talk to somebody. So to see your school do this, to come to these ceremonies and just get to sit there and watch these amazing speakers come and share their stories, and it means so much to me because, like I said earlier, it makes me incredibly proud of my service. It makes me proud because I'm seeing that this is what a community is, that you guys are the future, and that makes me feel very good. It makes me feel good knowing that the generation after me, the generations after me, care this much because that's what I hope my daughters learn, and I hope that's how my daughters feel. So that's how I felt sitting in the ceremony today.
And at the very end of my presentation, I hope you heard my challenge, basically to your generation. Coming to a place like Arlington Heights, which frankly is pretty well heeled. I mean, you've got a wonderful school here, and you've really grown up in a wonderful community. But I understand everybody has difficulties in life. I'm not naive about that. I get it. But you all are going to have difficulties in life coming up, and you might have some now. You should always cling to your faith and have mentors and seek mentors that are people with strong values, strong accomplishments, that are willing to guide you, and never give up hope. That's the beauty of this country. It is the beacon of hope and opportunity. That's why, millions, my parents immigrated here, my wife immigrated here, millions of people around the world. You got to ask yourself, if this is such a bad country, which some people say, why are so many people wanting to come here? Versus the minuscule few who say that, they want to leave the country. I'm still waiting for them to buy their tickets, by the way. But really, I just want to encourage you all. I've seen the great volunteerism, the spirit of serving at Hersey, and that's the type of thing that you need to continue when you go to college, or if you don't go to college, if you enter the workforce, in your communities, wherever they are. Be the example and be positive. Always be grateful. The peace is not the absence of war. Peace is the absence of fear. When you don't have fear, what do you have? You have joy. And so when I was in combat, I never once worried about my personal safety because I knew if the good Lord took me, I'd be in a better place. I was more concerned because I was a company commander, frankly, about leading my troops and not screwing up. Because if you're a commander in combat at whatever level, if you're a squad leader, if you're a platoon leader, if you make a mistake, the cost can be in the lives of your soldiers. the most precious commodity that anyone can have a responsibility for.
Before we wrap up, do you guys have any final thoughts you would like to add or share?
I just want to express my gratitude on letting me be here, on letting me be a part of this podcast, on getting to go out with you guys when you guys are going out building houses for veterans around the country, and to be sitting here with General Mukoyama. It's really cool for me to get to spend my Veterans Day doing this. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And my comment is that I get more out of this than you do, believe me. To be able to be here and see the quality of the students and your teachers and your administration, it really gives me hope for the future of our country. And just as I said before, I want to encourage you to take the mantle of leadership in your communities or whatever organization that you might join, and try to help people that really are in need, whether it's financial need, whether it's social need, physical need. The opportunities are tremendous, but you don't always have to do it directly yourself. You can still pursue another career. Let's say if, I was in the financial services career for 3 decades, but that enabled me to be able to take care of my family, but also then volunteer and do things for people.
All right. Well, thank you, General Jim and Eric, for joining us today on this special day on Veterans Day. And thank you to all of our viewers who are watching. Do not forget to thank your local veterans for their service. Thanks, guys.